Well, hello once again, and I welcome you to these broadcasts when I'm getting an opportunity to share with you. I'm moving back into what is the exposition from the epistles, and today it's James, and we shall be continuing on in the next 2 or 3 weeks on this epistle. And I am using the authorized version. I know I do occasionally use a slightly more modern one, but I think this one really explains itself quite simply. So we start off as James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Now, it's absolutely clear from this, there's no question, that he is writing to the Jewish people. And it's quite important to realize that some of the messages from the New Testament are to the church, and some are specifically to the Jews. But it still applies to all of us. And you can see from the way that he goes on, he's really speaking to Jewish people who've come to faith in Jesus. Because, of course, the Jewish nation basically rejected and still does reject Jesus as Messiah. But these people were early converts and were given the name of Christian as followers of Christ. I am not so happy with the use of the modern term of Messianic Jews, although it does describe them, that they are Jews who believe in the Messiah. But I want to look on them as followers of Jesus, because that's what you and I are as well, not just the Jews. So he's writing, as James is writing, to the tribes. And in verse 2, he says, "Brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations." In other words, this is not just what you might think of as temptation, it is testing and trial. And that's where we do find that much more clearly in some of the more modern translations. It's absolutely clear that he's talking about falling into many, the word diverse, many different trials and difficulties, because verse 3 explains it. Knowing this, that the trying or the testing of your faith brings patience. So really what he's trying to say here is that we should not be discouraged when we face trials, when we face difficulties, but rather that in the trials, in the difficulties, that we realize that we are being tested on our faith. You know, I've not had an easy life. Some people might think, oh, it's easy for him. He's just an evangelist. He grew up in a Christian home and so on. But yes, but I've gone through some of the biggest difficulties you can imagine. You all know that twice I've had cancer, that I was in prison. And there are times when I've had no money, when I've been virtually penniless and struggling, and several attempts to assassinate me, but not just that, but I've often faced a lot of opposition. And I'm quite interested to see that even as early in the church as in that first century with the disciples, that even Paul himself is acknowledging he faced a lot of opposition and trials. So we have to recognize that all these are to encourage us, to teach us, and to strengthen us. And I will say that my faith has been strengthened by the problems that I've gone through. And so in verse 4 he says, let patience have a perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. In other words, that we learn more through our difficulties than we do through our simple joys. And then in verse 5, he moves to a different side of it where he says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that gives to all men liberally, and criticizes not, and it shall be given him. So here is a very clear thing, and I think this does relate to prayer, and I certainly know it does relate in my prayer life, that if in any way I'm wanting to know questions, it's not just of saying lack wisdom in the sense of wisdom being something as a gift. It's more than that. If you are having questions and uncertain, don't be afraid in your uncertainty and in your questioning to ask God. I mean, I do all the time. I have to. In fact, I hardly get out of bed in the morning without saying, Lord, take care of today and organize it for me. And the older I get and the busier I get, the more I'm having to do it. I'm doing it all the time. I did it this morning. Lord, will you take care of my day and help me to get through it and through all the things? Because I've had a very busy schedule. Trying to organize flights and trying to organize travel and make sure that because I have to go on a journey in order to do something, and overseas, which means flying. And I do have to ask the Lord for wisdom. And even when I set off to travel in my car, even if I'm flying or traveling, I usually say, Lord, give me a comfortable journey without stress, because too many people get stressed up, and I don't want to be stressed up. So he's saying that if you need help or support, don't be afraid to ask God, who won't be upset with you because you're asking, but God will give you the answer. He'll give you what you're asking. The only thing is, the qualification is in verse 6, where he says, let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, because he that waves is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. Because this is the danger, and it's the danger with faith, it's the danger in our Christian life, that we have to be consistent. And I would use the word consistent here. Let him ask in faith, but consistently and believing, because verse 7 says, if we are not consistent and not asking in faith, we won't get anything.